Hello, and welcome to America's Geopolitics, where we break down the world's most pressing stories. It's Sunday, which means it's time for our weekly wrap-up. This week, we're diving into three major developments: President Trump's controversial remarks about expanding U.S. territory, rising tensions between Israel, the U.S., and Iran over nuclear sites, and China's growing dominance in the electrical vehicle and battery industries. Let's get started. This week, President Trump made waves again with his comments on territorial expansion, sparking debates across the geopolitical landscape. Let's break this down piece by piece, starting with Canada. Trump described the idea of incorporating Canada into the United States as a move to secure America's northern frontier. He emphasized the potential defense and economic benefits, but let's face it, this notion is as controversial as it gets. Canadian leaders predictably shot back swiftly. Ex-Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called the idea absurd and laughable, while other Canadian politicians emphasized their country's sovereignty. For most Canadians, the very thought of merging with the U.S. is unthinkable. This kind of rhetoric from Trump isn't just diplomatically insensitive, it's completely disconnected from the reality of modern relations. That being said, I do believe that within the next 20 years, Canada and the U.S. will be in some type of union, maybe not being a 51st state, but I think we can look back to this day as the day Trump started the negotiations for how we would react with Canada over the next 50 to 75 years. Next, let's talk about Trump's fascination with Greenland. Now, you might remember back in 2019, Trump floated the idea of buying Greenland from Denmark, citing its strategic location and untapped natural resources. The idea was laughed off by Danish officials at the time. Fast forward to 2025, Trump's back in office, and I don't think anybody's laughing this time. I mean, I know he puts it out there in a way that's not very palatable for most people, but I do believe this is another one of those things that maybe it's not today, but within the next 20, 30 years, I think Greenland will come fully under our sphere of control. And if Trump can get it done in the next 4 years, more power to him. And then, of course, there's the Panama Canal. Trump's suggestion that the U.S. should regain control of this vital trade artery is perhaps the most provocative of all. Let's remember, the Panama Canal was handed over to Panama in 1999 after decades of U.S. control. Trump's argument is that American oversight would ensure better management and security. Reclaiming the Panama Canal would not only be a logistical and political nightmare, but could also destabilize relations with Latin America. The canal is a cornerstone of Panama's economy and sovereignty. Any U.S. attempt to assert control would face massive international backlash. So what does all this mean? On one hand, Trump's remarks could be seen as political theater, a way to energize his base with bold, controversial ideas. On the other hand, they hint at a worldview that prioritizes U.S. dominance at any cost, even if it risks alienating allies and trading partners. Ultimately, the idea of territorial expansion in the 21st century feels more like a throwback to a bygone era. You know what era that was? The era before World War II. The Bretton Woods Agreement is coming apart. The way the world has done business since 1946 is dissolving right in front of our eyes. And I do think that the new world's going to look a lot more like the... Our second story this week focuses on escalating tensions between Israel, the United States, and Iran over Iran's nuclear ambitions. Could we be on the verge of a military confrontation? Let's take a closer look. First, let's establish the stakes. According to recent reports, Iran is closer than ever to weapons-grade uranium enrichment. Intelligence from both Israel and the United States suggests that Tehran's program has reached critical levels, possibly within weeks of producing material for a nuclear bomb. This development is fueling fears across the region and beyond. A nuclear-armed Iran is a threat not just to Israel, but to the entire world. Israel will do whatever is necessary to prevent this. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has long been vocal about his nation's red lines regarding Iran. Recent military drills conducted jointly with the United States simulated potential strikes on Iranian facilities, a clear message that the military option is on the table. These drills aren't just posturing. They're a signal to Iran that both nations are prepared for coordinated military action if diplomatic efforts fail. On the U.S. side, the incoming Trump administration is walking a fine line. While publicly advocating for diplomacy, there's a growing sense that patience is wearing thin. The new Secretary of State reiterated America's commitment to preventing a nuclear Iran, leaving military action on the table. We prefer diplomacy, but we remain prepared to act if Iran continues down this path. A strike on Iran's nuclear facilities wouldn't just involve the three main players. It could ignite a broader conflict in the Middle East. Iran has warned that any attack would result in retaliation against U.S. bases and allies in the region, potentially dragging nations like Saudi Arabia and the UAE into the fray. The risk of escalation is significant. Even a limited strike could spiral into a prolonged conflict, destabilizing the entire region and impacting global oil markets. The situation remains tense, with diplomacy appearing stalled. Whether this escalates into military action or finds a peaceful resolution could define the geopolitical landscape for years to come. We'll keep a close eye on the developments. Our final story this week dives into China's ever-expanding dominance in the electrical vehicle and battery sectors. With groundbreaking advancements and strategic moves, China has secured a commanding position in one of the 21st century's most critical industries. Let's break it down. China currently accounts for more than 60% of global EV battery production. Companies like CATL and BYD are leading the charge, outpacing Western competitors by a significant margin. These firms aren't just manufacturers, they're innovators, setting benchmarks in battery efficiency and cost effectiveness. What sets China apart is its vertical integration. From raw materials to finished batteries, Chinese companies dominate every step of the supply chain. This control not only ensures cost advantages, but also shields them from global disruptions. Chinese EV brands are also making waves internationally. Models from companies like NIO, Xpeng, and BYD are gaining traction in Europe, where they're competing directly with established automakers. Their competitive pricing, coupled with cutting-edge technology, is reshaping the global market. But it's not just about production. China controls much of the supply chain for critical materials like lithium, cobalt, and rare earth elements. These resources are the backbone of the EV revolution, and China's dominance gives it unparalleled leverage. For example, over 70% of the world's lithium processing capacity is in China. Western nations, despite their efforts, remain heavily reliant on Chinese imports for EV components. This dependency has sparked a race among the US and Europe to diversify their supply chains and ramp up domestic production. We're investing billions into domestic EV manufacturing and battery production to reduce reliance on foreign sources, but catching up to China won't be easy. So what does this mean for the future? China's head start in EVs and batteries positions it as a global leader in the green energy transition. The rest of the world has its work cut out to compete, but in a market that's rapidly evolving, the race is far from over. And that's a wrap for this week's edition of America's Geopolitics. From bold territorial ambitions and rising nuclear tensions to the shifting dynamics of global energy, it's clear that we're living in an era of rapid and unpredictable change. These stories remind us of the interconnected nature of today's world, where decisions in one region can ripple across the globe. Thank you for joining us, and don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth analysis on the issues shaping our times. See you next week.